Hello and welcome, this is Pounds2K Gaming here, coming to you with a tutorial video to coincide with the release of multiple new scenarios for Train Simulator 2020, which I've been working on for past half a year or so. Never really done anything like this before, so I'm kind of going to explain along the way and talk you through where I'm at, because it is still work in progress, but let's crack into it as soon as possible, really. So this tutorial is the Uxbridge to Wembley Park reduced service and return, depending what scenario you have downloaded with the Uxbridge to Wembley. It might be longer, it might be shorter, and I'll explain why that is later on. So let's hop into the hot seat and get cracking. So this is a S7 stock, which is used mostly by the district lines, more so than the Metropolitan, which uses the S8, which has an 8-car version. But I find the 7-car fits better for the length of the platforms on here. So you start off at Uxbridge. It's fairly easy to get to the train. It's literally right in front of you. You can't miss it. And then you're good to depart 5 minutes after the start of the scenario. So you'll have a green light on the signal there. You just got to keep an eye on where you're at in terms for your departure time, and then you can get yourself going and start working your way down towards Hillingdon. So if you're unfamiliar with the route, it's 15 miles an hour as we're going along the crossover there, and the signal which you can see coming up now is showing a green. Now I have had a few issues where at times it's just been completely blank, almost like a dead signal, so I really wouldn't worry too much about any of those signals. There we go, there you are, you got the blank signal right there. Sometimes it shows, sometimes it doesn't. The whistle board can be ignored at this particular time of the evening. General rule, if it's dark you don't need to whistle at a whistle board unless there's any particular hazard which you need to make, be it person or potential hazard aware of your presence. But obviously this is only Train Simulator 2020, so you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. So we're getting ourselves up to line speed now, which is 50 miles an hour for the S-Stock. We're sharing the line with the Piccadilly line, which can only get themselves up to 45, hence why you've got the different speed boards there. So the reason behind these scenarios in terms of the length is I have created a daytime version for you, a nighttime version, and a performance version, and I may also do a real-time version, or maybe not, depending how I decide to put that tutorial together. But basically the daytime and the nighttime are exactly the same and is designed as a straight out of the box scenario for you guys to use. It's in a working state. I've spent quite a few hours testing on it, where it's good to go and you'll have an enjoyable experience. It's not 100% perfect. There's a few little niggly aspects which don't always work flawlessly. Unfortunately, I don't have that much experience with the editor, and the custom signals have kind of given me a bit of a nightmare, and there's very little documentation in the editor as well, so I've kind of just been gun-hoing it really. So you'll find all the signals at the stations are all automatic signals. So if you come in too fast, that signal will not recognise your arrival and therefore won't turn green. And if they don't turn green, you will end up trip-cocking the system, and you'll end up passing that signal at danger. So you just need to be aware of that particular one. But now going back to the main point, the reason why I made these scenarios was I kind of made them for myself, and I thought I'd share them out there and put them with you guys, so you can enjoy them just as much as what I do. And it basically features multiple different scenarios. So, for example, this particular one, the Uxbridge to Wembley Park, the daytime version and the nighttime version features that route going back and forth, multiple times with AI trains on it, and go on for a good four hours or so. And the reason behind this is because I wanted to have an experience in Train Simulator 2020 where you can feel there's a bit of variation in the timetabling, so you actually feel like you're part of a wider operating network. And with a lot of scenarios out there, they're just not long enough to replicate that. You don't get that full sense of immersion, so I decided to kind of give it a go and just see how it would work. And it took a lot of testing to try and get it into a relatively good performance to immersion ratio, which is also why there's a performance version as well. So the performance version is if you do have performance issues, it reduces the timetabling, so it's less resourceful on your CPU basically. So there's less memory that needs to be used from your computer, and then you only have one leg to the destination, one leg back. So for example, the performance scenario from Uxbridge to Wembley Park will then just return back to Uxbridge again, and then that will be the end of the scenario there, in order to level of performance there. So there are multiple options out for you guys, and I'll also have linked somewhere in the video, pretty down in the description, to the other real-time tutorial video where if you really want to get into the immersion side of things and you want a surreal experience, you almost want to replicate what it could be like in theory to drive as a London Underground train operator, then you can tune into my real-time editor, which shows you fairly straightforwardly. Right, I notice this green signal on the fog repeaters are green, which means that signal which is displaying a red, that's also a green. So that's a simulator confusion issue. I haven't been able to nitpick that one. So like you can see, it's definitely a work in progress. And that's kind of down to the fact that the signals are custom made from Just Trains. So obviously it's on the Metropolitan line from the product developed by Just Trains, along with the S-Stock variants to go along with that. And that uses its own custom framework in terms of how the signaling work. So that uses quite a bit of memory. And because this scenario is very resource intensive, I believe what is happening is that the memory is leaking, and that's where you have the few discrepancies in the signals. So if you have a fog repeater which is giving you a go ahead signal where you're cleared to proceed, then every single time always follow the fog repeater signal, because if the main signal is showing you a different output, then that output, more than likely, from what I've come across, is wrong. So you just have to bear that in mind. But yeah, going back to the main point, I'll also put out a real-time editor video where it will be a really short and basic to the point video, which takes you guys into the editor, and in the space of less than 10 minutes, I haven't timed it, but it's definitely less than 10 minutes, with a couple of clicks and a few inputs from yourselves, you can change the date, the time. If you've got custom weather presets like I have, you can shove those in there as well. So for the base scenarios, I've kept them at the default train simulator, so the requirements for you guys, if you have your own custom schemes in there, or you just have the default weather packs, these scenarios will work for you either way, as long as you've got the base train simulator content and the content of the Just Trains Metropolitan line and the S7 stock add-on, which is a separate Just Trains edition. Providing you got those, everything will work smoothly on this, well, on all of the scenarios, basically. And with a couple of clicks you can change the time, the date, so you can set the date to the day you want to drive, the time you want to drive, and it will then show you how to then go into the timetable, literally make a couple of different inputs from the different AI trains, including your own schedule. So for example, there is a total of 8 trains which operate on this entire map between Wembley and the various off branches such as Watford, Chesham, Amersham and Uxbridge. So there's 8 trains in total, including your own. All you'd have to do is make some simple changes to that in terms of the scheduling. So their departure times, you would just line it up with the new time that you've set in the simulator. So you just have to input that over 8 times, simple conversions, then just press the play button and it's good to go. And I think what I'll do to make it really simplified is, instead of releasing it as another scenario for you to download, I think the better way of, if you do want to go down that route, is to actually show you how to then duplicate or copy on the existing, be that daytime or nighttime or one of the performance ones, and then show you from there how to then quickly edit that scenario and you're good to go. And that's another reason why these scenario lengths, which isn't the performance version, are designed to last for a few hours. So you can choose how many times you want to go up and down. You can then spend a good few hours in the simulator with only having to spend like 5-10 minutes editing it to make it real time if you want to, or just straight out the box keep the times as I've set them with the default scenarios, be that the daytime one or the nighttime one, performance, whatever, and then just basically crack on straight into it really and just enjoy yourselves. So what I will say is the Uxbridge to Wembley Park scenario, that was the first scenario I started working on, and was certainly it's the most simple scenario. It's got the least amount of issues with it. So if you do encounter anything, and you'd be able to find maybe a solution or something's kind of occurred differently which I haven't picked up on this video, then please by all means comment it down in the comments. Let's get a discussion going, and then I can try and see if I can troubleshoot it, and see if we can get somewhere. I almost want to make this like a community project really, because I'm kind of wanting to have a bit of to and fro and bounce off of you guys, because I don't have a lot of experience with the editor. It's kind of like a one-off project for me, kind of just delving my foot in. Obviously I spend the majority of my time actually creating content rather than putting together scenarios and modding, if you will. So that service there is the Wembley to Uxbridge service. So how this works is that there are a few services which start off based in Wembley Park, or should I say the Neasden Depot, that's where they start off, so that regardless of what leg of your journey you're on, you will encounter some form of AI train. So at this particular point in time, this is the most stable version. So AI trains, for the most part, don't tend to get confused. This is why the actual map or line controller view is going to be your friend. So that's really going to tell you whether your scenario is going to be working or not. And speaking of little nitpicks, this little signal on the left here, I don't believe that turns green. So what you need to be careful of is if you come into this station too fast, it will then remain a red light. And the problem with that is because it's an automatic signal, you automatically conclude that that's going to be a green, and that's a fault on the simulator's part. So if you come in too fast, that will be a red light, and then you'll end up passing that danger, and you'll trip up the whole system. So you do need to bear that in mind. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. That usually only happens if you're a bit like me, and then you kind of get thinking about the route, and then you get sidetracked from what you were doing when you're testing it, and yeah, you kind of end up forgetting to brake, as you do, you know. Anyway, never mind, moving swiftly on. So we're now moving from Rayners Lane to West Harrow, and then we'll be joining the other mainline branch when we arrive at Harrow on the Hill. Now, I remember using this particular recording when I did the trailer, basically putting it out there that I'm going to be releasing these scenarios. You'll find that once we leave West Harrow, you will see a Metropolitan line train then go on the overhead as we start to approach onto intersecting the main line there. So do keep an eye out for that. I'll let you know when that comes into view. It's quite a nice little shot, actually. Which kind of brings me nicely onto the next point, is that I've tried to design the scheduling so that it's robust. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you're operating your train faster than what the schedule allows for, or slower than what the schedule allows for, then the whole system should still keep running effectively. So that means you can afford to be running a little bit behind schedule, a little bit late. I mean, it is the underground after all. You can also afford to be running a little bit early as well. And for the most part, you won't have too many problems. But the best thing I can really tell you is just keep an eye on your map, and if you kind of haven't encountered an AI train for a while, just open up the map and find one of the AI trains, have a quick little look across the network, just make sure they're still moving. Because that's one of the headaches that I have found sometimes where the memory's leaked, for the reason there's a lot of commands and scheduling which is already preloaded onto these individual services. And for simplicity, and also the fact I couldn't really suss it out, is the other AI trains, they're not designated as an AI train, so you can technically jump from one into another one. And I think the reason why I kind of did that was for simplicity, for when I then duplicated the scenarios and started working onto another one and stuff. So if you have a look slightly to the right of the window, you can see a couple of lights, and you'll just see the train just pass overhead. There we go, there he is. So as we go into the underpass here, you will notice that I will be reducing the power. And the reason why we need to do this is we need to reduce our speed down to 20 miles an hour as we then cross over into platform 4, I believe it is. It's either 3 or 4. I think it's 4. So you go past a 30 mile an hour sign there, but then you got your 20 miles an hour further down. So it's just easier just to bring it to a controlled speed. Another thing to note about door operation, and this is kind of a big one, which I don't know whether just trains can actually work on a solution to this, and I don't even know if they're aware of this, but I have noticed that the doors have a time limit on them. So, for example, the typical time limit for the doors is about, I think, about 35-40 seconds or something, and then they automatically close themselves. It's kind of, I would say, a design limitation simulator, but when I got my hands on the Gatwick Express Class 390, those train door operations are fully manual, so it looks like Dovetail Games have found a way to properly encode door operations to be fully manual in the simulator. And the problem with the automatic concept is that when the doors close and you haven't actually manually told them to close, you have a scenario where you then have to press the close button to, and I say hopefully here, reset the system so it thinks your doors are closed. Otherwise you may have a situation where when you then go to reopen your doors again, you'll find only the first car's train doors will then work. So what I've done is I use a time limit now, so I tend to only give it about 30 seconds, and then I'll then make sure that I then close the doors from there. So it's just something to be aware of. I don't know whether anyone else has come across that problem or whether it's just me. If anyone knows a fix for that, actually, please do let me know in the comments, because it does my head in a bit, to be honest. So as we're still working our way over to Preston Road, why don't I quickly delve into what I'm looking at for the future, because I want to keep providing support onto this, onto the scenarios which I've just released. But what I have found is that that does allocate quite a bit of my resources away from my channel and my overall presence as being a content creator. But what I want to do is kind of keep it on the side as side work and slowly keep working on it bit by bit with the help of you guys and your feedback, your suggestions, and any tips you may have for me, or any suggestions. But in terms of roadmaps, for the time being, I would be looking at extending somehow to Aldgate. Now you look at a tube map, that looks quite considerable. And actually, if you look at the amount of stations, it doesn't actually seem that bad. The only thing that concerns me is obviously there's more distance of track to cover, and that will obviously have an impact on the feel of the environment, how frequent the AI trains seem to be. So I kind of need to test that one out. I think it probably would work in some form. Whether there may need to be a few cutbacks here and there in terms of how many times you'd be able to go the whole route up and down. I could probably see that just being a one leg all the way down to Aldgate and one way back. But I would have to see, really. But again, I could kind of almost see that almost starting from scratch, kind of just using the groundwork. So honestly, I couldn't see that coming for a while. So the reason why I decided to just go as far as Wembley Park was because at the time when I thought about doing these scenarios, there was some engineering works going on last year. Weekend engineering works it was. And there was no service between Wembley Park and Aldgate. So I thought to myself, well, that would certainly be an interesting reduced service concept to have a go at. And then I was also thinking performance as well. And I did also think to myself it was going to be a relatively small project. However, it seems I was wrong. So, we are at Wembley Park here, and we're going to be going into Neasden Depot. Now, what you have to do here is you have to press the tab button on your keyboard to effectively mimic contacting the line controller, and that will then allow you to then proceed forward in the fact that the depot signal will then turn as it just did then. Your departure be approved, and then you can continue on your journey. If you do not follow that step and then you continue, it will be a regular SPAD where you'll pass a signal of danger and you'll just trip the whole system. And you don't want that, because then that's going to delay you. In fact, speaking of SPADs, I'm going to refer to this little bit of content which I picked up. Now I can't really divulge how I acquired this, but it comes from an official source, and it's the district line information for train operators, or should I say for train operations. so that's officially titled. And this is a bit of an outdated manual now. It was live at the time when I acquired it, but now it's updated. It is outdated because it's back in the day where the old D78 stocks and the C stocks were in operation. And there's a nice little piece here about SPADs. So I think I'm just gonna read some of it out to you because it's kind of fascinating actually. So it goes on about all the official information, blah 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 blah. Let's not go into too much about that. But basically, this is a great line which I pass on to all of you guys. If you end up spadding a signal, which tripcocks you in the simulator, if you are in doubt, do not move your train and obtain clarification. And also, if you've got any depot signals like that which are in red, if it's the Uxbridge service, which this is, you can just override that because there's no reason for there to be an obstruction. You kind of got to do a bit of line controller work yourself sometimes, because sometimes those signals will work, sometimes they won't. If they don't, just bring up the map, check that the line is clear ahead, try the technique of asking for that signal to be cleared. If it clears itself, then proceed as normal, there won't be a problem. If it doesn't clear itself, then there probably is a conflict somewhere in the route, and there's a good reason for that. Or at least that's what I've come to realise after hours of really learning how the simulator treats these different signals on this route. But yeah, anyway, if in doubt, don't move your train, obtain clarification, open the map, make sure that you're completely clear, all the points are set. So, in other words, what you've got to do is kind of learn your route really, which is helped by obviously the purple little line that you get given. So, for example, back there on that previous siding signal, that displayed a danger signal. However, quite clearly, as you can see, this siding is completely free from any kind of obstruction, so there's no reason for it to be displaying the signal it was. And then that's why when I requested on the simulator, it then changed that to then allow you to proceed. But yeah, as we're slowly rolling our way all the way to the end, they have this clever little oh, what's the word? Not a euphemism. No, I can't think of what you call it. Anyway, basically, it's a clever breakdown of SPAD. Right, so basically, your SPAD is for signal passed at danger. So if you take the SP and the A and the D, and you can turn it into a sentence. And they have it written down here, which kind of caught my eye because it's quite interesting. So, speeding people are dangerous. Let's reverse this. Drivers are professional and safe. Which is SPAD reversed. How clever is that? That's pretty clever, isn't it? I like that. Maybe I'm just easily amused, I don't know. I thought that was quite clever. Yeah, now if only I had one of these for the Metropolitan line, that would certainly make my life a little easier. So again, when it comes to the computer system, it's literally the all stations service from Aldgate to Uxbridge, and Uxbridge to Aldgate. It comes under on the computer systems the slow service. You shove that number in, and it will then change all the relevant data so the front of your train then displays correctly. And you may notice on the computer system there it did display it as being at Aldgate. But quite cleverly done. Once you do come into Wembley, that will then change and update itself, and it will register that you're actually at Wembley Park. So yeah, do bear that in mind, because obviously Wembley Park isn't a terminal station, which is kind of how we're using it in these scenarios. So when you do look at the onboard computer systems, you'll see that the routes are designed all the way to the end of Aldgate, so from one end of the line to the other. So you will find yourself in some of the scenarios having to using basically the correct line designation, but under that line designation it will consider Wembley Park as a non-stop station, and that's kind of when you start to get into your semi-fast and your fast services. But there's no need to go into that on this particular one, because we're only going to Uxbridge, which is fairly linear and self-explanatory. So this scenario is definitely the easiest one, because it uses the tracks which are out of the way. So I basically shoved the Uxbridge one in the depot which is furthest away and has its own entryway from the other AI trains operating all the way up to Amersham, Chesham and Watford. So in terms of simplicity, this is probably the easiest scenario per se out of all of them on offer. So it's a good starting point to kind of get you familiar with how the map works and how the actual scenario works, because what I'm trying to kind of do is something a little different from what I've ever come across before in Train Simulator. I mean maybe someone else has tried it, I don't know, I haven't personally seen it, but again, it'd be great just to be able to get some feedback and actually see how it works on other people's systems straight out of the box, and that it's not just a fluke, really. So the versatility is pretty good. For example, these signals we're passing here, if you do have them horizontal, which basically means they're at danger, the reason for that will be is because there is a train in the Wembley platform ahead of you, which you're also going to. So if you are early or you're late or what have you, then for the most part it will work. The only limitations is that being early for the most part is fine, because you can be held back when you come to a critical section track and you'll be made to hold there, albeit probably usually if you were to be holding, for example, say you were coming down you're coming down from Amersham and you were between your North Harrow and the Harrow on the Hill, and you're just about to go past a section where the fast services intersect the same section. So for example, let's say you ended up running ahead of the Chesham service, and the Chesham service was designated to go first, and you arrived significantly earlier, I would have logically thought in life the slow service would just be allowed to proceed into Harrow on the Hill, because of the slower and fast branches which separate again after that station. But because of the limitation of the simulator, what you'll find is that the slow service would be forced to wait until that Chesham service goes ahead as designed in the schedule. And the reverse is true for if you're late. So if you end up being significantly late, so say you are that Chesham service that ends up way behind that slow service, behind schedule, and that slow service will be held at the same signal while it waits for you to pass on forwards. But that's kind of just the limitations of the simulator, so it's kind of as close to being as immersive as possible. So, long story short, the more you can keep to schedule, the less chances you have of other trains faltering. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, basically, yes, delays can happen. The AI trains can have a degree of delay, but at some point, particularly when you get to around the depot side of things, there is a possibility, or around areas such as Arrow on the Hill, where if then the train behind of the slow AI train, which is slow because you're slow, it's possible that the scheduling between those AI can get confused, and that's when you get issues that can arise. And that's mostly because really basically what happens is the editor is a tool to create a choreographed and simulated scenario. So everything is specifically run, and it has to work that way. And if it breaks outside of those norms, it can't then just operate the network like you would actually operate a network. It will then be like, oh no, wait, this isn't how it was supposed to go to the second. So yeah, nah, I refuse to work. I'm done. Everything, stop. Which, if you're near the end of your route, you can get away with that, not a problem. But if you're not, then yeah, especially if it's on the return leg, or should I say, you're on the outbound leg, and then one of the inward legs end up having a problem, and then you've got to go back that way. Yeah. Yeah, you might as well consider it as engineering work, because you're never going to clear that blockage. But again, that's kind of part of the limitations, which is a very good reason why it's a work in progress. And the more I look at the limitations, the more I think that it may not necessarily be in what would be classed as a complete state. But I have been working very hard on it, and it's certainly at the most stable position which I have been able to get it at thus far. So, where are we at? I believe this is Northwick Park, and then we're heading back to Harrow on the Hill. We can join back a road up quite a segment. I should also point out, recording these, or recording all of the tutorial videos, expect the positions of the trains to be slightly different to where yours are. Now, to expand on that, what I'm basically saying is to add a bit of variety to showing that by having several return journeys, it does offer a different experience. I haven't recorded it from the beginning of the scenario, so what I've done is that on each tutorial video I have driven all the way down to done the whole first leg of a journey, then returned back and then started recording from there. So we're just about to pass an automatic signal up ahead, and you'll see we've just slowed down to under 35 miles an hour, to which the signal has turned green. The red signal above that should also turn green. Again, one of those things where you do have the odd glitch here and there. Sometimes it will turn green, it'll work all as intended to do so, but for the most part I've never come across where the bottom signal doesn't turn green, so as long as your bottom signal turns green, then you're fine. If that stays red and all, and then you're above your 35 miles an hour, then that's probably your problem. Tend to get off the power nicely once you get past those signals, because you're slowing down to 20 anyway, so there's no point being too harsh on the brakes. I mean, after all, you are still providing a transportation service. If you feel the wind, you know the train's coming. Well, that's true for deep tube, I suppose. For any of you who have watched the trailer video for these scenarios, which I released a little while ago, this will be familiar to you, with the Metropolitan 9 train coming into the opposite platform there at the end of the video. This is definitely the fastest bit of track at this particular section, because you can get it up to 30 miles an hour. Be aware, obviously, you're going to be going downhill, so until you get past that 50 mile an hour, you're probably going to be fighting the speed a little bit. The whistle ball can be ignored, because it's cut-off time in the evening. There's your 50 mile an hour sign just passing on the left there. It's a bit small. But the good concept is the way the underground works is the speed boards, you have to be at that speed when the front of your train passes it. Another whistle board there. So that does make it easier for those who don't have as much experience, where you'd logically think, oh, speed, that's the speed I've got to be at, whereas on the National Rail side of things, it's when the last car of your train's gone through, and that's a lot harder to deduce when that is, especially when you can't replicate every tiny little signal detail and marker in this train simulator, because it's not the best optimized. But then again, you got to remember it's quite old. I mean, how long has this train simulator been around? It's been around for donkey's years. I mean, I know I got hold of it when it was like 2013, but I think it's been around since like 2010, 2009 or something. I don't know. It's quite old though. Another thing you need to be aware of, and if you come across this issue frequently, or especially if you haven't been able to complete your first full leg both there and back, is if you start to come across an AI train where you can see it in the distance but it doesn't properly load itself, and then you start having carriages missing and stuff. Now that's usually a good indicator that the memory is maxed out, and I think I encountered this once at one point on one of the other tutorial videos. So if you do have that, you'd be better off switching to the performance scenario. Another particular issue that comes along is the fact that I think it's got something to do with the fact it's a custom train, possibly, with how it works, but I'm not too sure. Basically, long story short, again, you've got a green signal there. Just pay attention to the green signal, ignore the red one. To reduce your speed to 30 miles an hour. Yeah, so long story short, there is an issue where sometimes the AI train will come into a station and it won't open its doors to collect passengers even though it's been given that specific instruction. And I think that might be a memory thing, but I'm not too sure. The other issue is that I have come across trains where the doors are actually stuck open. So you'll see like an AI train that comes whizzing past you at like 50 miles an hour with all its side doors like fully open. Which again is linked to the whole picking up passengers and the scheduling, timetabling. I honestly have no idea if there's a fix for that, to be honest with you. I have no idea. If there is and one of you know about it, then fantastic. Otherwise, that's kind of just, it's one of those things. It's very much a game of luck. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. There's no consistency, basically, and that is frustrating because it makes troubleshooting extremely difficult. It's also probably worth mentioning is the fact that trying to record Train Simulator is a bit of a hindrance. It's almost like an Achilles heel, really, because recording yourself takes its toll on your resources, and then you start using Train Simulator, which isn't most effective at using resources either. So yeah, it certainly results in a drop of a good 10 to 15 frames. Nice green signals, that's just what I like to see. In fact, when I was putting some of the finishing touches and stuff together the other day, I decided to basically find a YouTube video, the full journey of, say, I think it was Watford, starting from Watford, then going all the way down to Aldgate. So I decided to time it. So I basically got a train at Watford, and I got the video to start playing at the time the doors closed, and I decided to play it. At the same time I left the station, and I just thought I would see how that would fare, just out of interest, just see how close to being a realistic scale the actual route was by just trains to the Metropolitan line. And to my surprise, it's literally practically one-to-one scale. I was really surprised. Really surprised. Really, really close to one-to-one scale. I mean, I didn't exactly take any detailed statistics or anything, but just kind of, from the perception of my eye, just see where the video was at to where I was at, and it was bang on. 100% bang on, all the way through down to Harrow on the Hill. It kind of went out the window from there because it was a semi-fast service, whereas my Watford was a slow service. So we've almost completed the return leg back to Uxbridge. Now, what should be noted is if you get to the end of scenario, or if you're on the performance scenario, you will not return to Uxbridge. Right? So basically, on the final leg of all the scenarios, instead of returning back to Uxbridge, in theory you terminate here at Hillingdon, and your passenger service becomes null and void, and I'll then take you into the Uxbridge sidings. And the reason for this was because of how the signals worked. Because the only way I'll be able to re-engineer that to work, because obviously I started that as the first scenario that I did, and I wasn't as informed and didn't have as much experience about how the line interacts with the train simulator, with the signalling and stuff. And what I found out was that in some scenarios I've had to start the train away from the starting station. What do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. The Chesham to Wembley Park and the Watford to Wembley Park scenarios, they do not start at Chesham, and the other one does not start at Watford. And the reason for that is because if you put a train in the platform of one of these stations, or for example, we started in Uxbridge at the platform station, which is fine, That's all fine. That all works well and good. The signals are happy. You go out, you do your route, you go back to Wembley Park, and then you return. And then when you return, the problem is that the signal then thinks there's a train in the platform when there's not. So what you're seeing here is, because I haven't got to the end of the scenario, I will be directed back to the platform. That'll work just fine, because I've basically put you into another platform, and I don't want to experiment putting the siding bit back to that other platform just in case, because the Uxbridge signals are really dodgy. So you've got to get under about 10 miles an hour for this signal to be happy with you. And there we go, we got the turn. We got the turn off to go into the essential platform there. And that is a green signal, by the way. It looks red there, but if you have the white lighting at the top, which signalizes you're going to be branching off, then it's actually a green signal. By all means, then take it back up to 50 miles an hour, but you'll have to reduce it back down to 10 again. But the sidings on your right hand side, right above you, probably can't see too well, but they end just where that building is. That's where you'll end up ending the scenario, in one of the siding bays there, because then all you'll have is, by having it the way I did have it, is a red signal, and then you'd have to end up tripping the signal, and that doesn't do well for anybody. So there's been a few obstacles I've had to become in making this, but for the most part it's been rather successful. So yeah, please, by all means, get out there, download the file, install the scenarios, shut them all in one, and then you can choose when you load up your simulator which ones you want to give a go. And please let me know down in the comments, give me some feedback, what worked well, what didn't work so well. Let's start a conversation and let's see if we can try and suss out where we want to go with this. Because again, there wasn't really any particular boundaries with this. It was kind of like just well, let's just wing it. Just made it for myself, so there's no expectations, there's no goals or anything like that. So kind of make it however we want to make it, really. So I hope you find the tutorial video interesting. Again, feel free to refer back to it. If you have any problems in the line, you can cross-reference with this video. I talked through of the majority of the problems that you may occur. If you come across with something different, you can cross-reference using this video. So you can kind of keep an eye out and see where everything's at. And you might find something which I haven't come across yet. So that would be good to know, and I might be able to see if there's anything I can do on my end, or it could just be, some systems may not like it, other systems do. I mean, yeah, it's one of those, really. It's obviously using a platform which is, again, by today's standards, not the best optimized, and it's a bit of a nightmare to work with, especially with the editor, where there's very little documentation on it. But again, please get out there, drive it, see what you think. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope you find this tutorial helpful. Certainly give you a good run through, be it you watch it in full, be it you skip parts here, there and everywhere, provided you find it useful. Then that's kind of what it's designed to do, just to kind of help you all get to grips with the knowledge I've picked up on while creating these scenarios, and making sure they work to the best of their abilities. Because when you know where the tiny little known issues are, and you know how to get around those, then you'll find that these scenarios do actually work pretty well, all things considered, in the long run. So, as always, this is Poundstuka Gaming. Thank you very much for your support. Feel free, give a like, subscribe, check me out on my Twitter, or check my website and stuff like that. I always tend to post on the old Twitter where I'm at and everything. Just got myself a Facebook page and everything set up, and there should be some streaming planned, rebooting the whole schedule ideas and everything. So that's going to be coming back into play now. I'm kind of winding down on this whole scenario side of things a bit. But again, many thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.